Welcome Chosen X. You wake to a tremor under language, a thin seam where certainty has split. Ordinary sounds now cut with edges, as if light has grazed a fresh fracture. For years you moved through rehearsed rooms, following polite rhythms. Today an unseen seam unfastens and something older reaches. At first the sensation is subtle. A metallic note at the back of your throat, the hollow clack of a memory trying to climb past a locked jaw. You try to name it and labels slide off. This is not mere anger or sorrow. It arrives as heat, or recognition that roots you and then asks you to stand. Glyphs pulse behind your lids. Not film but living maps, neighborhoods stitched into sunlight. A plaza that remembers songs. A lamp that held vows. You did not invent these fragments. They belong to a lineage of breath that threaded other seasons before this skin learned to inhale. The room feels askew. Furniture keeps familiar angles yet shadows refuse to agree. Time folds like a paper writing back. Conversations you once accepted register as echoes of scripts meant for strangers. You taste sudden distaste for easy compromises. As the seam widens, small companions of recall appear. A copper coin becomes a key. A phrase overheard years ago fits an old lock. City noise harmonizes into a distant drum, a rhythm muffled by generations of polite quiet. Where silence once protected it now feels like a ceiling that must shatter. Fear arrives with ceremony yet the body primes to minimize. Heart slows like a careful animal avoiding hunters. Old strategies whisper patience. Something else speaks louder. It has the blunt confidence of a weathered instrument. It names what training forbade. It says you are more than a passenger of habit. You search for allies and find hints that others stir too. A glance held longer than a greeting. A child drawing constellations with decisive fingers. An old woman folding a torn map into a deliberate shape. Alone each sign is fragile. Together they form an underground current. By midday the seam has become a fissure that brightens the space. Hands remember motions teachers never taught. They move as if guided by coordinates you never studied. You touch an object and layers strip away like varnish dissolving under solvent. The world reveals patched seams and the worst repairs begin to unpick. This revelation is not tender. It asks for witness and labor. It asks that you stop performing roles that thin your presence. It asks that you refuse the small courtesies designed to feed a larger apparatus. Obligations peel from your shoulders as if scales are molting into new armor. Memory presses with adoration and accusation. It rewards no complacency. It logs every slight that trained you to apologize for speaking. It keeps every dismissal that taught you to lower your light. It demands not revenge but honesty so sharp it severs polite myths. You withdraw into an interior chapel of light and private vows. There you confess the soft betrayals you accepted to remain safe. You recall promises made in nights when stars were doors. The promises wait without shame. They only want your commitment. The first test arrives in daylight. A meeting that once required concession now asks you to bend toward an easy falsehood. The old reflex leans in. For a moment you almost yield. Then a smaller voice, older than fear, straightens your posture. You decline the lie. The room rearranges because of that refusal. People notice. Eyes narrow not only from malice but surprise. Some step back like witnesses to a rare bird. Some murmur and alter their stories. A few smile as if a familiar pain eased by your refusal to comply. The ripple is modest and honest. By night the seam has become a doorway pulsing with quiet heat. You stand at the threshold feeling the odd mixture of fright and relief that follows an act of truth. There is no applause, only the slow clearing of space and the knowledge that the work ahead requires more than courage. It asks for a daily refusal to be invisible again. You sleep but not as before. Rest keeps you buoyant, alert as if a lighthouse rewired to your ribcage. In that hollow, early outlines of a plan take shape. Not a manual but a movement. A cadence that will guide what you touch and what you let disintegrate. When morning arrives you do not seek permission. You step into rooms with steadier breath and a less ready smile. The fracture continues to widen, but it does not threaten. It clarifies. It directs you toward a jurisdiction where old agreements no longer hold. You are invited to act as if small courtesies no longer protect anyone. This first day closes without triumph, yet with alignment. No crown appears. No altar. Instead, the universe offers a small shard of mirror. When you lift it, you do not find a stranger. You find a sequence of lights that answers to your name. The recognition is quiet. It is my responsibility. It opens a long account awaiting your signature. Keep moving with steady calm now. Dawn finds you with ruins behind your eyes. Memories do not come politely, they fall like a tide that remembers shorelines you never walked. At first they are small, iron on your tongue, the shape of a fingertip on clay, an echo of a bell predating the calendar in your kitchen. Then images gather until your skull holds a museum of vanished streets. Each relic arrives like a friend turned stern. You see corridors that were altars, markets dealing in promises, ships steering by constellations your teachers ignored. Some scenes gleam, bright as wind-polished metal. Others lie ash-slicked, proof history sometimes fails to endure. You cannot catalog these moments without their moral weight. They are not souvenirs. They are invoices. Every shard carries a ledger of choices and consequences. When you touch those memories, you accept unfinished reckonings. They press against your ribs like a book demanding balance. The inheritance is not blessed. It asks for austerity. Pleasure shrinks into suspicion. Comfort tastes like compromise. Old loyalties feel like padded shackles. An affinity with ruin grows in your chest, not a wish for collapse but recognition that some structures cannot be mended and must be cut away. In the market of recollection you meet faces repeating under different names. A merchant with a compass that points away from safe harbors. A child who learns letters by burning them. A woman who plants a tree that blooms when no one remains to see. They are versions of a single task that keeps returning in service of something you are only beginning to grasp. Memory brings fragments of language too. Not ordinary words but tonal patterns and ritual grammar. You hum a cadence and the air arranges itself, the pattern calms a cityless fear under your skin. The sound defies translation but directs your hands to repair what does not expect mending. Resistance answers. Denial wears a kind face. People offer explanations that soothe and redirect. They hand you tidy stories that collapse complexity and return you to the fold. Those offers are delayed and dressed as kindness. When you accept them, the past folds into oblivion and new knowledge hardens into another comfortable lie. You test honesty with a simple refusal. A friend asks you to sign papers to preserve a memory he calls tradition. The offer smells of varnish. Saying no feels like cutting a cord. Saying yes feels like sleepwalking into another era. You choose refusal and solitude follows. Solitude is not punishment. It is an apprenticeship. Silence carves space for listening. In it, ancestral tones instruct how to thread a new sequence. They do not demand reliving every calamity but insist you learn their grammar. That grammar becomes a tool to shape what comes next. You practice modest rituals that are practical rather than mystical. You trace unfamiliar alphabets on a fogged window. You sweep places where neglect clings. The motions rewire attention. Attention proves the necessary currency. There is mourning in the tender logic of regret. You catalog what you lost when diverted. Some losses were necessary, others accidental. You place each lament on a table in a room with many doors and allow them to be seen. Seeing reduces their power. As days pass, you discover an architecture of responsibility. It is composed of small refusals and occasional hard actions. It requires patience without complacency and courage without theatrics. The pattern is not a heroic myth. It is a steady turn toward truth, like a wheel that will not sink back into mud. One image returns so insistently it organizes the rest, a hammered disc lying in sand, its surface engraved with lines that are neither map nor calendar but an instruction. When your palm meets that disc in mind, the lines align with bones and a sound like distant glass issues from a place you cannot name. The sound carries a mandate: carry memory without becoming its prisoner. This is the burden you accept. It is not triumphal and offers no comfort. It offers clarity and duty. The world will demand explanations you will not give. You will be asked to soften and tidy tragedy. You must refuse. Your refusal will become a geography of altars built from deliberate honesty. As these patterns settle, you notice small alignments, faces and crowds that answer your cadence, doors opening into rooms lined with old maps, a single street light that flickers when you pass as if testing your claim. These occurrences are not accidents. They are bookmarks left by time to mark where to begin. You record them like coordinates and allow them to shape the scale of what you will dismantle and what you will preserve. Night closes on you with gentleness. Rest returns, but not forgetfulness. Fragments consolidate into a map. When you wake, you will not carry less. You will carry more direction. The weight will be leveraged when you learn to angle it. For now you hold the ledger with steady hands and breathe into the long work ahead. True. The wind feels different, as if it carries orders. You step outside and ordinary noise rearranges itself to clear a path. Windows open a fraction wider. A stray dog halts mid-stride and looks at you like a reader understanding a sentence. Your presence stretches into the street like a chord that finds matching notes. You do not seek spectacle. Your acts are simple and exact. Where rot has been hidden under polish, you strip the finish and reveal joints that were never properly joined. Where old commitments were made with quiet coercion, you name them aloud and watch how people first flinch then remember. Naming is surgical. It disconnects what has been normalized. Rain comes in sheets that do not level the ground. It cleans where neglect pooled and leaves tender ruins exposed so that repair can begin. You do not celebrate ruins. You catalog salvage. A child brings a splintered toy and watches you mend a wheel. The child learns urgency and patience in one lesson. That is how culture shifts, by small hands learning care. Not every action lands. Some attempts to correct make new harm. You discover that good intent without knowledge repeats cycles. This forces you to slow. You practice restraint. You choose interventions that minimize collateral suffering. Power that proves itself by moderation becomes a force of trust rather than fear. Corruption adapts. Officials rewrite rules to look benevolent. Corporations rebrand their extractions as kindness. Opinion makers craft narratives designed to make you appear theatrical. Antagonism takes many faces. You expect it and design responses that are transparent, precise, and unromantic. Clarity undercuts manipulation. Communities begin to form around practical craft. A baker refuses to knead bread thin enough to feed profit rather than hunger. A librarian keeps a ledger of books burned by neglect and restores them. Neighbors learn rites of maintenance rather than ceremonies of grief. These rituals reorder priorities and alter what it means to belong. You create no temple. Your meetings take place in kitchens, in bus garages, in clinics. Where people gather to fix, to name, and to teach, the new rhythm spreads. Mending becomes contagious because people see immediate benefit. It is not theatrical. It is measurable by warm rooms and quieter streets. Conflict sharpens lessons. A plan to reopen a playground meets bureaucratic delay dressed as caution. You press, using public testimony and discreet pressure from allies who learn to hold steady. The playground opens. Children run with a fierceness that teaches adults what was at stake. The victory is small and it matters. Your circle grows not by charisma but by competence. A mechanic who refuses to certify unsafe vehicles. A teacher who restores time for messy conversation. A nurse who insists on long shifts and real care. These are practical saints. Their daily practices change the fabric of ordinary life. You also learn to let go. Some institutions will never align. Repairing them consumes more than it returns. The wisdom is to stop salvaging at the point where salvage becomes a mask for false virtue. Let those institutions wither if they refuse to be useful. Preservation without function burdens the living. At dusk the city looks like a book reopened. New chapters begin with small lines, repairs that make rooms livable, a pattern of attention that others can copy. Your work is not romantic. It is a ledger of acts that, compiled, shift the axis of daily life. You measure success in mornings people can breathe and in children who do not learn to apologize for existing. The storm recedes for now and leaves behind a map of possibilities. The map is imperfect. It shows ruins and clearings, hazards and plots of fertile ground. Your task is to keep walking the map with hands that can build and eyes that can spot rot. You are no longer acting alone. That is not safe. It is multiplication. Other people now have the vocabulary of refusal and the tools of repair. They do not follow you blindly. They move in ways that complement your pace and temper your extremes. The movement becomes less about an individual and more about a pattern of practice. When night falls, you sit on a stoop and listen to a radio that plays a song with lyrics that were once censored. The song feels like an old truth returning home. You know there will be backlash, attempts to reframe into silence. You also know that the work you fostered makes those attempts weaker. You sleep with a sense that this phase is not about dramatic overthrow but about steady remodeling. The needed changes are granular and radical in combination. You rest, not from victory, but to return with arms ready for rebuilding. Tomorrow you will wake to a more detailed map. Tasks will multiply and the work will call for hands that remember unspoken methods. Each repair will teach discernment and when mercy means release. Keep the ledger and tend the small, honest fires. You wake beneath a sky that feels rearranged by intention. The air carries a patient clarity and the streets move with a softer logic. Where traffic once blurred into anonymous motion, patterns emerge that invite interpretation. You read the grain of benches, the angle of a window, as if each surface were a line of a poem addressed to you. Neighbors begin to gather around work rather than spectacle. A baker pauses and blesses dough as if honoring a promise. A mechanic straightens his shoulders and looks at you with a recognition that is spare and exact. These small harmonies form an infrastructure of consent that hums beneath daily life and raises a steady expectation for truth. Now the task is construction as much as demolition. You are not called to fury alone. You are tasked to compose repairs. You map what should remain and with deliberate hands cut away what stands only as theater. The work is precise and humble. It demands that you turn attention into craft. Words reshape into instruments. When you name an object, the world rearranges to receive that name. Teaching a neighbor a phrase, you watch it become a tool for mending rather than a slogan. Your speech grows into a compass and the community orients by its bearing. You learn generosity that demands reciprocity. Giving becomes an exchange of competence for trust. A baker learns to bake with awareness and teaches a mechanic the ethics of mending. Care accumulates like currency in a system committed to longevity. Alliances are practical, not performative. Some people arrive seeking theater rather than work. You instruct them with simple proofs. Do the task through storms and feed a child afterwards. Those who remain are companions who soil their hands willingly. Projects appear small and consequential. A garden overtaken by neglect becomes a school for soil. Children learn urgency in planting and patience in watering. A playground opened after community insistence teaches adults what was at stake. The victories are modest and real. Institutions approach offering shiny partnerships. Their language is smooth and indulgent. You refuse flattery and propose compacts measured by months and results rather than headlines. This boundary preserves the integrity of the living work. The movement grows by competence. A nurse refuses to cut shifts short. A teacher preserves time for messy conversation. These practices alter everyday life. Repair is not romantic. It is steady tending that produces measurable warmth in quieter rooms. You learn to let go of salvage when preservation only masks harm. Some structures must fall. Your decision to release them is not cruelty. It is stewardship. It prevents the living from being burdened by dead weight. At night the stars feel like punctuation that closes old sentences and begins new ones. You stand under that sky and understand rebuilding requires stubborn love. It asks you to carry disappointments and celebrate small mornings when people can finally breathe. In private you make lists. Repair a roof, teach a child to read weather, reclaim a vacant lot, record an elder's recipe. Each line becomes a liturgy of doing. You draw a tiny compass beside each task to remind yourself that direction matters more than speed. Community rituals arise without dogma. Meetings happen in kitchens and clinics where people name one practice they will stop defending because it preserves comfortable harm. The meetings leave you lighter as if sweeping dust from an attic. You do not chase spectacle. Your authority grows because you show up and mend what others thought permanent. The echo that follows is durability, not triumph. The city becomes a book reopened, its pages stitched daily by hands that remember how to care. Over months the pattern refines itself into a fine architecture of practice. You and others build not monuments but systems that sustain. Workshops teach how to read soil and sky and measure the health of shared places by laughter and clear water and drains. You invent rituals that are practical. A midday bell signals time to repair rather than time for performance. When people answer that bell they exchange gossip for tools and learn the economy of lasting care. The city collects these small acts like ornaments on a branch and they become a quiet atlas. You walk through neighborhoods that feel newly patient. Children stop apologizing for existing. Elders reclaim recipes and maps that guide seasons. The new rules value truth and labor in tenderness and limits. Each day you wake to a slightly more honest world and the work continues. Keep moving. Keep tending. Let the map teach you. Morning opens with practical light and you walk into it carrying a ledger of choices. Old assumptions have been cleared enough that your intentions land with consequence. The neighborhood answers not to spectacle but to routine. People do not follow you because of myths. They follow because you show how to fix things and keep promises. Your instruments are simple, steady hands, plain honesty, and patience to measure results. You teach neighbors how to manage water, mend roofs, and read weather with children. These practices spread because they heal actual needs. The language of repair re-enters public speech and rumor diminishes under the weight of care. Temptations will come wrapped in charm. Institutions offer partnerships that look like recognition but aim to domesticate the work. You refuse arrangements that substitute image for substance. Your refusal is a kind of architecture. It creates a field where accountability can grow and where small acts compound into resilient patterns. Loss remains present. Some old alliances will not bear the new terms. Let them end. Grief is a necessary clearing rather than a casualty. You name the losses, give them space, and then practice returning to the tasks that rebuild warmth in houses and clarity in meetings. The emerging community values competence over rhetoric. A mechanic who insists on safe repairs gains trust. A teacher who preserves time for unpolished conversation changes children. A baker who refuses to overwork dough creates food that nourishes rather than profits. These are not saints. They are neighbors learning an ethic of care. When resistance sharpens its teeth, you do not retaliate with spectacle. You apply transparency and precision. You publish agreements. Keep records. Let meetings be open where consequences are visible. When power must be confronted, use clarity rather than grand gestures. Clear practice corrodes pretense. You will not build monuments. You will design systems that endure. Practical rituals appear, a bell for midday repair, a ledger kept at the clinic, a rota for shared chores. These structures demand discipline and generosity. They become ordinary because people see immediate benefit in warm rooms and working drains. One evening you walk past the old market and find children planting beans in neat rows. A teacher reads the weather with patience and the crowd listens in silence. The site holds a scar but its soil gives. You feel a quiet satisfaction because the city is learning the habits of self-care. Now understand that the work continues on other channels. A moving field appears centered on your screen with demonstrations and tonal practice that extend what text cannot carry alone. There you will see exact methods and hear patterns that guide breath and rhythm for labor. This visual field is not an interruption. It is a continuation. If the transmission lands, subscribe and turn on notifications so future sequences arrive when you choose to receive them. Treat these settings as tools rather than trophies. They will serve as reminders to practice and as timers for communal sessions where method and discipline are shared. Invite apprentices and teach the ethics of repair. Let them earn access to tools through competence, not ceremony. Monitor work and correct mistakes with instruction rather than shame. False imitation shows when repairs fail or promises go unmet. Teach posture and patience so the craft outlives any teacher. Keep practical caches and simple redundancies. Store seed and basic tools where neighbors can find them in emergencies. Record methods in plain guides and spoken narratives so knowledge outlives memory. These steps are prudence. They make the community resilient without centralizing power in any pair of hands. Celebrate small inaugurations for ordinary successes. When a well runs clear, mark the day with a shared meal and a maintenance list. When a school keeps doors open for honest conversation, plant a tree to commemorate the practice. Tiny rites anchor habits and permit quiet joy. Accept that your work will survive without you if you build systems rather than cults. Step back when others are ready to lead and measure success by the network continuing without your presence. Many will want memorials. Refuse that impulse and instead build commons that reproduce ordinary competence. Finally, know that instruction continues in the moving frame before you. The screen delivers demonstrations, tonal exercises to steady breath, and close-ups of mending hands. Let the image teach patterns to practice in rooms and yards. Watch, act on one detail immediately and teach it to another.